When she knocked on my door that night and said she wasn't leaving, I had two choices. Let fear win again, or finally take a chance on something real. Daniel had been living in apartment 4B for exactly 6 months when she moved in across the hall. 6 months since the divorce papers were signed. 6 months since he'd packed up half a life into cardboard boxes and started over in this modest 2-bedroom with cream-colored walls and a view of the parking lot. He didn't mind the quiet. Actually, he preferred it. After years of walking on eggshells, measuring every word, second-guessing every decision, the silence felt like freedom. His mornings were simple now. Coffee at 6. Shower at 6:30. Out the door by 7:15 for his job at the design firm downtown. Evenings were predictable, too. Takeout on Tuesdays and Fridays. Gym on Mondays and Thursdays. Weekends were for catching up on work and pretending he didn't notice how empty the apartment felt. That's how things were until October 15th. When the moving truck arrived, Daniel first saw her through his peephole. He'd heard the commotion in the hallway around 9 in the morning on a Saturday. Voices, the scraping of furniture, the heavy footfalls of movers doing their job. Curiosity got the better of him, and he looked out to see a woman directing 2 men carrying a navy blue couch. She was maybe 5'6", dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater. There was something purposeful about the way she moved, the way she pointed and gestured, making sure everything went exactly where she wanted it. He watched for a minute, then felt weird about it and went back to his coffee. Their first real interaction came 3 days later. Daniel was fumbling with his keys, a bag of groceries threatening to tear in his left arm when his door swung open. The woman from across the hall was standing there, one hand on her own doorknob, the other holding a phone to her ear. She glanced at him, and their eyes met for just a second. She gave him a quick, polite smile, the kind neighbors give each other when they're acknowledging existence but not quite ready for conversation. He nodded back, finally got his door open, and disappeared inside. That became their routine for the next week. Polite smiles, occasional nods, the universal language of apartment dwellers who respect boundaries. But Daniel started noticing things. Small things. Like how she always seemed to be on the phone when she left in the morning, her voice clipped and professional. How she carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive and heavy. How some nights he'd hear her come home past 10, her heels clicking against the hallway tile, followed by the soft thud of her door closing. He didn't mean to pay attention. It just happened. When you live alone and the walls are thin, you become aware of the rhythms of the people around you. 2 weeks after she moved in, Daniel was coming back from the gym around 8 in the evening when he saw her struggling with 4 grocery bags and a large box balanced precariously on top. She was trying to dig her keys out of her purse without dropping everything, and it clearly wasn't going well. "Need a hand?" Daniel offered, stopping a few feet away. She looked up, surprised, then relieved. "That would be amazing, actually. Thank you." He took 2 of the bags in the box while she unlocked her door. "I'm Daniel, by the way." "4B. "Victoria," she said, pushing her door open with her hip. 4C, obviously. He followed her in just far enough to set the bags and box on her kitchen counter. Her apartment had the same layout as his, but felt completely different. Where his was still half empty and impersonal, hers already looked lived in. Books on shelves, plants by the window, colorful throw pillows on the couch. "Thanks again," Victoria said, already starting to unpack. "I definitely overestimated my carrying capacity." "No problem. Welcome to the building." That should have been it. A neighborly moment, nothing more. But as Daniel walked back to his apartment, he found himself thinking about her smile, the way she'd looked genuinely grateful rather than just polite. Over the next few days, their brief encounters became slightly longer. A conversation about the building's terrible water pressure, a shared complaint about the parking situation, small talk about the weather turning cold. Then came the argument. Daniel was working late on a Wednesday night, his laptop open on the couch, headphones in, when he heard raised voices through the wall. He pulled out one earbud and listened. It was definitely Victoria, her voice muffled but clearly upset. "I told you I can't do this anymore," she was saying. "No, you listen for once." Daniel felt uncomfortable eavesdropping but couldn't help catching pieces. Something about trust, something about lies. The conversation went on for maybe 20 minutes before everything went quiet. The next morning, Victoria looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her usual put-together appearance slightly disheveled. She was locking her door when Daniel stepped into the hallway. "Morning," he said carefully. She turned, and for a second, he thought she might cry, but she pulled it together, mustering a tired smile. "Morning. Hey, thanks again for helping with those groceries the other day. I forgot to mention it. Anytime." They rode the elevator down together in silence. When they reached the lobby, she stopped. "Sorry if I kept you up last night." "I know the walls are thin." "I didn't hear anything." Daniel lied. She gave him a look that said she knew he was lying but appreciated it anyway. That weekend, everything changed because of a stupid power outage. It happened on Saturday around 7 in the evening. Daniel was heating up leftover Chinese food when everything went dark. He checked his phone. No service issues, so it was definitely the building. He grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer and stepped into the hallway. Other residents were already emerging, everyone trying to figure out if it was just their floor or the whole building. Someone yelled up the stairwell that it was everywhere. The building manager was already on it, they said. Could be an hour, could be 3. Daniel was about to retreat to his apartment when he saw Victoria standing in her doorway, holding a candle in a glass jar. "Well, this is fun," she said dryly. "Nothing like forced unplugging from technology," he replied. She laughed. "You want to sit in the hallway? I've got wine but no corkscrew that doesn't require electricity. I have a manual one." "Perfect." 10 minutes later, they were sitting against the wall between their apartments, a bottle of red wine and 2 plastic cups between them. The hallway was lit by a combination of flashlights and candles, and somehow the absurdity of it all made conversation flow easier. They talked about their jobs. Victoria worked in pharmaceutical sales, which explained the long hours and constant phone calls. She traveled a lot, she said, which was why she'd needed a place with month-to-month flexibility. Daniel told her about his work as a graphic designer, how he'd been at the same firm for 8 years, how stable and boring it was. "Boring sounds nice sometimes," Victoria said, taking a sip of wine. "You think so? My life's been the opposite of boring lately, and not in a good way." She paused, then seemed to decide something. "I moved here from Seattle. Left pretty much everything behind." Daniel waited. He'd learned that sometimes people just needed space to talk. "Bad breakup," she continued. "Really bad. The kind where you realize you've been making excuses for someone for years and one day you just can't anymore." "I get that," Daniel said quietly. "I'm divorced. 6 months now. I'm sorry, don't be. It was a long time coming. We stayed together way longer than we should have because it seemed easier than starting over. Turns out starting over isn't as scary as I thought." Victoria studied him in the candlelight. "Is that true, or are you just saying it?" Daniel considered this. "Both, maybe. Some days are easier than others." They talked for another hour, sharing stories about their past relationships, their fears, their hopes for whatever came next. It was the kind of conversation you have with strangers on planes or in late-night diners. Honest because there's no history, no context, just 2 people being real with each other. When the power finally came back on, the hallway lights blazing to life, they both squinted and laughed. "Well, that was an adventure," Victoria said, standing and brushing off her jeans. "Same time next power outage?" Daniel joked. She smiled, a real one this time. "I'd like that." They said goodnight and returned to their respective apartments. Daniel closed his door and leaned against it, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. A spark of connection, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as okay with the quiet as he'd convinced himself he was. The morning after the power outage, Daniel woke up thinking about Victoria. Not in any dramatic way, just a quiet awareness that something had shifted. He'd connected with someone, really connected, and it felt both exciting and terrifying. He was pouring coffee when there was a knock at his door. He opened it to find Victoria standing there, already dressed for work, looking more refreshed than she had the previous morning. "Hey," she said, holding up her phone. "I know this is random, but do you drink coffee? I was about to make a run to that place on the corner, and I figured I'd ask." Yeah, sure. I mean, I just made some, but I never turned down good coffee." "Great. Text me your order. I already put my number in your phone last night." "Hope that's not weird." Daniel checked his phone, and sure enough, there was a new contact labeled Victoria 4C. He smiled. Not weird, efficient. She grinned and headed for the elevator. 20 minutes later, she knocked again with 2 large coffees and a bag of pastries. "I got extras," she explained. Breakfast meeting got canceled, so I have time. They ended up sitting at his small kitchen table talking about nothing and everything. How she thought the coffee shop was overpriced but still went every day. How he was working on a logo redesign for a local restaurant. Small talk that felt comfortable, easy. That became their new routine. Coffee 2 or 3 mornings a week. Sometimes she'd grab it, sometimes he would. They'd spend 15 minutes catching up before heading to their respective jobs. A week later, Victoria texted him on a Thursday evening. "There's a new Thai place downtown. Want to try it?" Daniel stared at the message. Was this a date? Or just neighbors getting dinner? He decided not to overthink it and typed back, "Sure, what time?" They met at the restaurant at 7. It was casual, with mismatched furniture and string lights hanging from the ceiling. They ordered too much food and spent 2 hours talking, laughing, sharing spring rolls and arguing over whether pad thai was overrated. Walking back to their building, the November air cold enough to see their breath, Victoria linked her arm through his. It was such a natural gesture that Daniel almost didn't notice at first. But once he did, he became hyper-aware of every point where they touched. "This was nice," she said as they reached their floor. Yeah, it was. They stood in the hallway between their doors, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "We should do it again sometime," Victoria suggested. "Definitely." The next Saturday, they went to the art museum. Daniel wasn't particularly into art, but Victoria had mentioned wanting to see a new exhibition, and he found himself offering to go with her. They spent hours wandering through galleries. Victoria explaining things she liked about certain paintings. Daniel making jokes about the abstract pieces that looked like his nephew could have made them. "You're terrible," she laughed, swatting his arm when he compared a sculpture to a pile of laundry. "I'm honest. There's a difference." They grabbed lunch at the museum cafe, then walked through the nearby park even though it was freezing. Victoria told him more about her life in Seattle, about the relationship that had slowly crushed her spirit, about her ex who had made her feel small, unimportant, like she was always too much or not enough, never just right. He'd say I was too focused on work, she explained, hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets. But then when I tried to spend more time with him, he'd complain I was too clingy. I couldn't win, and the worst part was I kept trying. I kept thinking if I just figured out the right balance, it would work. "That's not how relationships should be," Daniel said quietly. "I know that now. Took me way too long to figure it out." Daniel shared his own story, how his marriage had been good at first, then gradually became a series of negotiations and compromises that left neither of them happy. How his ex-wife had eventually admitted she'd stopped being in love with him years ago, but stayed out of habit. How that revelation had hurt more than the divorce itself. "I felt like a failure," he admitted, "like I couldn't even keep my own marriage together." "That's not all on you," Victoria said. "It takes 2 people to make a relationship work." "Yeah, but it also takes 2 people to let it fall apart." They walked in silence for a bit, their shoulders occasionally bumping together. When they got back to the building, Victoria suggested watching a movie. They ended up in her apartment, sprawled on opposite ends of her couch with a bowl of popcorn between them. Some action movie neither of them was really watching playing on the TV. Somewhere during the second act, Victoria shifted closer. Then closer again. By the time the credits rolled, they were sitting next to each other, no space between them, her head resting against his shoulder. Daniel knew he should probably go. It was late after midnight and staying longer felt dangerous. Not because Victoria was dangerous, but because he could feel something building between them, something that scared him. "I should head back," he said. "Not moving, probably," Victoria agreed. Also not moving. They sat there for another 5 minutes before Daniel finally stood. Victoria walked him to the door, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The air felt charged, heavy with possibility. Daniel leaned in slightly. Victoria did too. Their faces were inches apart and he could smell her shampoo. Something floral and clean. His heart was racing, then he pulled back. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. I don't want to mess this up." Victoria's expression flickered between hurt and understanding. "Mess what up?" Us, our friendship." "I'm not ready for anything complicated," she nodded slowly. "Okay, yeah, no, I get it." Victoria, but it's fine, really. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Yeah, tomorrow." He left, and as soon as his door closed behind him, he wanted to kick himself. What was he doing? Why had he pulled away? But even as he asked himself these questions, he knew the answer. He was scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of hurting her. Scared of what he was starting to feel. That night, Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The way Victoria had looked at him. The way his heart had jumped. The way he'd ruined everything by being a coward. Across the hall, Victoria was probably doing the same thing. And for the first time in 6 months, Daniel's quiet apartment felt unbearably lonely. 3 days passed after that almost kiss, and they were the longest 3 days Daniel had experienced in months. He saw Victoria twice in the hallway, and both times the conversation was awkward and brief. The easy comfort they'd built over the past week seemed to have evaporated overnight. "Morning," she'd say, already moving toward the elevator. "Morning," he'd reply, watching her go and hating himself a little more. By Thursday, Daniel had convinced himself that he'd permanently damaged their friendship. Friday evening, he needed to get out of his apartment before he drove himself crazy with overthinking. He grabbed his jacket and headed out for a walk. No destination in mind, just needing to move. When he returned 2 hours later, he saw Victoria in the building lobby. She wasn't alone. A tall guy with perfect hair and an expensive-looking coat was with her, his hand on the small of her back as they headed toward the elevator. She was laughing at something he said, looking more relaxed than Daniel had seen her in days. Something twisted in his chest. Jealousy. He had no right to feel it, but there it was, sharp and undeniable. He hung back, waiting until they'd gone up before heading to the stairs. He didn't want to share an elevator ride with them. Back in his apartment, Daniel tried to focus on work, on anything other than the fact that Victoria was probably with that guy right now. He failed miserably. Every sound from the hallway made him wonder if it was them leaving. Every creak of the building made him imagine their conversation, their laughter. Around 10, he heard Victoria's door open and close. Just once. Then silence. He felt simultaneously relieved and pathetic. What was wrong with him? He'd pushed her away, and now he was upset that she might be moving on. That wasn't fair to anyone, least of all Victoria. Saturday morning, Daniel decided he needed to apologize. Not for pulling away necessarily, but for being weird about it afterward, for letting things get awkward, for not being honest about what he was feeling. He knocked on her door around 10. No answer, but he could hear music playing inside, and he was pretty sure he heard movement. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. "Victoria, I know you're in there." The music cut off. Several seconds of silence. Then footsteps approaching the door, but it didn't open. "I'm not really up for company right now," she called through the door. "I just want to talk." 5 minutes. "Daniel, please?" More silence. Then the deadbolt clicked and the door opened a crack. Victoria stood there in a bathrobe, her hair wet, no makeup, looking tired and guarded. 5 minutes, she said, stepping back to let him in. Her apartment smelled like vanilla and coffee. There were dishes in the sink, a blanket bunched up on the couch, signs of a quiet morning alone. "So talk," Victoria said, crossing her arms. Daniel realized he hadn't actually planned what to say. "I wanted to apologize for being weird this week, for making things awkward between us." "You didn't make things awkward. I did that by... I shouldn't have assumed anything." "You didn't assume." I did lean in. "I wanted to kiss you. I just got scared." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "Scared of what?" "Of messing up again. Of jumping into something when I'm still figuring out how to be okay on my own. Of hurting you because I'm not ready for what you might want." "And what do you think I want?" "I don't know. That's part of the problem." Victoria moved to the couch and sat down, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "You want to know what I want?" "Honestly, I'm not even sure anymore. A month ago, I would have said I wanted to be alone, to focus on myself, to not think about relationships or men or any of it. But then I met you and things got complicated." Daniel remained standing, keeping distance between them. "I saw you last night." "With that guy." "My cousin," Victoria said flatly. "Jake, he's in town for a conference." "We had dinner." "Oh." Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. "I didn't... You thought I was on a date." It wasn't a question. "And let me guess, that bothered you?" He couldn't lie. "Yeah, it did." "So let me get this straight," Victoria said, her voice rising slightly. "You pull away because you're not ready for anything complicated. You make it clear that whatever this is between us should stay platonic. But then you get upset when you think I'm seeing someone else? That's not fair, Daniel." I know it's not. Then what are we doing here? What do you actually want? The question hung in the air between them. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. I don't know. I mean, I do know, but I'm scared to say it because once I say it, it becomes real, and real things can hurt you. Victoria stood up, the blanket falling to the couch. Everything can hurt you. That's life. You can't protect yourself from pain by avoiding every connection. Trust me, I tried that. It doesn't work. Victoria, no, let me finish. She stepped closer to him, her eyes intense. My ex destroyed my confidence, made me feel like I wasn't worth love, like I was too difficult, too demanding, not enough in all the ways that mattered. When I moved here, I told myself I was done. No more relationships, no more putting myself out there, no more risking that kind of pain. But then you helped me with my groceries, and we had coffee, and you made me laugh, and suddenly I was breaking all my own rules. Daniel's throat felt tight. I make you break your rules? Constantly. And it terrifies me, because the last time I let someone in, it nearly broke me. But the difference is you see me, like actually see me, not the version of me I present at work or the version I think people want. You see the messy, complicated, still figuring it out version, and you don't run away. Well, except you did run away, but that's why we're having this conversation. I didn't run because of you. I ran because of me. I know that, Victoria said softly. And I understand being scared. I'm scared too. But at some point, you have to decide if the fear is bigger than the possibility. Because I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. They stood there facing each other, the morning light streaming through her windows. Daniel could hear his heartbeat in his ears, feel the weight of the moment. I think about you all the time, he admitted quietly. When I'm at work, when I'm trying to sleep, when I see something funny and want to share it. You're the first person I think of. And that scares me because it's only been a few weeks and I shouldn't feel this much this fast. Victoria's eyes glistened. Who says you shouldn't? Common sense? Self-preservation? Or maybe it's just honest. She took another step closer. I think about you too. And I'm choosing to not let that scare me away. But I can't make that choice for you, Daniel. You have to decide what you want. I want you, he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I want coffee in the morning and Thai food on Thursday nights and museums on Saturday afternoons. I want to hear about your terrible day at work and tell you about my boring projects. I want all of it. I'm just terrified I'll ruin it. Then don't ruin it, Victoria said simply. Be scared. That's fine. I'm scared too. But be scared with me instead of running from me. She was right in front of him now, close enough to touch. Daniel reached out, his hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. I'm sorry, he said, for pulling away, for being a coward, for making you think any of this was about you not being enough. I'm sorry too, she said, for pushing when you weren't ready, for not just asking what was going on instead of assuming. They stood there, holding hands, both of them smiling despite the emotional weight of the conversation. Outside, the city hummed with its usual Saturday morning noise. But inside Victoria's apartment, everything felt still, balanced on the edge of something new. So what happens now? Daniel asked. Victoria squeezed his hand. I don't know, but maybe we figure it out together. Together sounds good. She leaned up slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted to. He didn't. This time, when their lips met, he didn't run. And in that moment, with the morning light around them and the weight of their conversation still settling, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that maybe, just maybe, taking a chance on someone could be worth the risk. Daniel stayed at Victoria's apartment for another hour that morning. They didn't talk about anything heavy, just sat on her couch drinking coffee and catching up on the 3 awkward days they'd spent avoiding each other. It felt easy again, natural, like they'd found their rhythm. But as comfortable as it was, there was still something unresolved between them. A tension that wasn't uncomfortable but wasn't quite settled either. When Daniel finally left to run errands, they both knew this conversation wasn't over. It had just been paused. The rest of the weekend passed quietly. They texted a few times, nothing important, just checking in. Daniel felt lighter than he had in days, but he also felt uncertain. They'd admitted their feelings, kissed, agreed to move forward together. But what did that actually mean? Were they dating? Taking things slow? He wanted to ask but didn't want to seem like he was overthinking again. Monday at work dragged. Daniel kept checking his phone, hoping for a message from Victoria, feeling ridiculous every time he did. When 5 o'clock finally came, he practically ran out of the office. On the drive home, she texted, "Are you around tonight? Need to talk about something." His stomach dropped. That didn't sound good. In his experience, need to talk was never followed by good news. But he typed back, "Yeah, I'll be home by 6. When he pulled into the parking lot, he saw Victoria's car in her usual spot. His hands were sweating as he rode the elevator up. This was stupid. They'd just had a good conversation 2 days ago. Everything was fine. Why was he spiraling? He'd barely unlocked his door when he heard hers open. "Hey," Victoria said, standing in her doorway. She was wearing work clothes still, a dark blazer and slacks, but she looked nervous. "Hey, everything okay?" "Yeah, I think so. Can I come in?" Of course, she followed him inside, and he noticed she was carrying something. A small bag, maybe? No, it was just her purse. She set it down on his kitchen counter and turned to face him. "So," she started, then stopped, took a breath, started again. "I've been thinking about Saturday, about what we said, what we agreed to." "Okay," Daniel said carefully. "And I realize we kind of left things vague, which I know was probably intentional because we're both trying not to overthink this, but I'm going crazy with the uncertainty." He relaxed slightly. "I've been thinking the same thing." "You have?" "Yeah. I kept wanting to text you and ask what we are, but I didn't want to be that guy who needs everything defined immediately." Victoria laughed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I've been doing the exact same thing." "This is ridiculous." "Completely." They smiled at each other, and just like that, the weirdness dissolved. Daniel gestured to the couch. "Want to sit down? Talk this through?" "Actually, no," Victoria said. "I think we've done enough talking. We keep talking ourselves into circles, and I'm tired of it. Then what do you want to do?" She stepped closer to him, her expression shifting from nervous to determined. "I want to stop overthinking this. I want to stop being scared of what might go wrong and just focus on what feels right." "And you feel right, Daniel. You felt right since that stupid power outage when we sat in the hallway drinking wine and being honest with each other." His heart was racing again, but this time it felt different, not anxious but anticipatory. "You feel right to me too, so let's just do this. No more pulling back. No more second guessing. Let's just be honest about what we want and see where it goes." "I can do that," he said quietly. Victoria moved even closer, until there was barely any space between them. "Good, because I need you to know something." "What?" "I'm falling for you. Like, really falling. And I know it's fast, and I know we both have baggage, but I don't care anymore. Life's too short to play it safe." Daniel felt something shift in his chest like a lock clicking open. All the fear he'd been carrying, all the self-protection and careful distance, suddenly seemed pointless. Victoria was right. Life was too short. "I'm falling for you too," he admitted. "Have been for a while now." They kissed then, and it was different from Saturday. Less tentative, more certain. This wasn't a question or a possibility. This was a decision they were both making together. When they broke apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. "I have a work trip," she said. "Leaving tomorrow afternoon, gone for 5 days." "Okay. And I really don't want to go because I feel like we just figured this out and I don't want to leave." "I'll still be here when you get back." Daniel promised. "You better be." That night, they ordered pizza and watched a movie, but neither of them paid much attention to it. They were too busy just being together, talking about nothing and everything, making up for the awkward days they'd spent avoiding each other. Around 11, Victoria said she should probably go pack for her trip. Daniel walked her to his door, not ready for her to leave, but knowing she had to. "Call me when you land?" he asked. "Of course." She kissed him one more time, soft and sweet, then headed across the hall. At her door, she turned back. "Hey, Daniel? Yeah? Thanks for being patient with me. With us. Always." The next evening, Daniel's apartment felt too quiet. Victoria had texted him from the airport, sent a picture of her terrible plane food, told him she'd call when she got to the hotel. But now it was almost midnight and he hadn't heard from her. He tried not to worry. She was probably just tired from traveling. His phone rang at 12:15. "Hey." Victoria's voice came through, sounding exhausted. "Sorry it's so late. My flight got delayed, then the hotel lost my reservation. It's been a nightmare. It's fine. I'm just glad you made it." They talked for almost an hour. Victoria lying in her hotel bed, Daniel stretched out on his couch. They talked about her trip, his day at work, random observations about life. It was comfortable, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of just starting. "I miss you," Victoria said suddenly. "Is that weird? We live across the hall from each other. I saw you like 14 hours ago." "Not weird," Daniel said. "I miss you too." The next 4 days followed a similar pattern. They'd text throughout the day when Victoria had breaks between meetings. She'd call every night, usually late, and they'd talk until one of them was falling asleep. Daniel found himself looking forward to those calls more than anything else in his day. On Friday evening, her flight was supposed to land at 6. Daniel found himself checking the time every few minutes, watching the clock like a teenager waiting for a date. He cleaned his apartment, which was ridiculous because she wasn't even coming over. Probably. Maybe. He didn't know. At 6:47, he heard footsteps in the hallway, then a knock at his door. He opened it to find Victoria standing there, still in her travel clothes, rolling suitcase beside her, looking tired but happy. "Hey," she said. "Hey, welcome back." She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. "I know I should probably go unpack and shower and everything, but I really just wanted to see you first." "I'm glad you did." They stood there in his entryway, just looking at each other, and Daniel realized something. This feeling, this pull toward her, it wasn't going away. If anything, the 5 days apart had made it stronger. This wasn't just attraction or convenience or filling a lonely void. This was real. "Come here," he said, pulling her into a hug. Victoria wrapped her arms around him, her face pressed against his chest. "I actually really hated being away," she mumbled. "I kept seeing things I wanted to tell you about, and you were too far away. I'm right here now." They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other. Then Victoria pulled back slightly, looking up at him. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay." While I was gone, I had a lot of time to think. About us, about what I want, about what I'm ready for. And I realized something. Daniel's heart was pounding. "What's that?" "I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from getting hurt by keeping people at a distance. You already matter to me, Daniel. Like a lot. And I know that's scary, but I'm done running from it." "Victoria, I'm not done," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. "I know you're scared too. I know we both have reasons to be cautious. But I think we're better together than we are alone. I think we could be really good together, if we're brave enough to try. And I'm ready to be brave if you are." Daniel felt something settle in his chest. All the fear, all the uncertainty, it was still there. But it was quieter now, overshadowed by something bigger, by possibility, by hope, by the woman standing in front of him, being vulnerable and honest and asking him to meet her halfway. "I'm ready," he said. "I've been ready. I just needed to stop getting in my own way." Victoria's smile widened. "So we're doing this? For real?" "For real." She kissed him, and it felt like a beginning. Not just of a relationship, but of something bigger. A new chapter. A chance to be brave, to be open, to choose connection over safety. When they finally broke apart, Victoria laughed. "I should really go shower and unpack. I'm gross from traveling. You look beautiful. You look beautiful. You're biased. Completely." She grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. "Give me an hour? Then maybe we can get dinner or something?" "I'll be here." She smiled at him one more time, then disappeared across the hall. Daniel closed his door and leaned against it, feeling like he could breathe fully for the first time in days. No longer than that, maybe for the first time in years. Part 5. Morning after and beyond, Daniel woke up to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the smell of coffee. For a confused moment, he thought he'd overslept, that he was late for work. Then he remembered it was Saturday. Then he remembered Victoria. He sat up quickly, running his hand through his messy hair. Last night came back in pieces. Dinner at the Italian place downtown. Walking back through the cold November air, their hands linked. Sitting on his couch talking until almost 2 in the morning. Victoria curled up against him, her eyes getting heavy. Him suggesting she could stay if she was too tired to walk the 10 feet to her own apartment. Her laughing but agreeing. She'd fallen asleep on his couch around 2:30. He'd grabbed a blanket from his room, covered her up, and then couldn't bring himself to leave her alone. So he'd settled into the armchair across from the couch, watching her sleep for a few minutes before dozing off himself. Now he walked out to the living room and found the couch empty, the blanket neatly folded. For a second, panic hit him. Had she left without saying anything? But then he heard movement in his kitchen. Victoria was standing at his counter in the same clothes from last night, her hair pulled back, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She looked up when she heard him and smiled. "Morning. Hope you don't mind. I figured out your coffee maker. It's fancy, by the way. Way nicer than mine." "Morning," Daniel said, still processing the scene. "You didn't have to do that. I know. But I wanted coffee, and it seemed rude to make some just for myself when you're right here." She handed him one of the mugs. "I didn't know how you'd take it, so it's just black. Sugar and milk are on the counter if you need them." They stood there in his small kitchen drinking coffee as morning light filled the apartment. It should have been awkward. The morning after, even though nothing had really happened. 2 people still figuring out what they were doing. But somehow it wasn't awkward at all. "I should probably get out of your hair," Victoria said after a few minutes. "Let you have your Saturday. You're not in my hair. But if you need to go do stuff, I understand." She set her mug down and looked at him. Really looked at him. "Here's the thing. I don't want to go. I want to stay here and drink coffee and talk to you and maybe make breakfast. But I also don't want to be that person who's suddenly always around, you know? We just started this and I don't want to overwhelm you." Daniel set his own mug down and stepped closer to her. "You're not overwhelming me. And I want you to stay. But I also want you to feel like you can go if you need to. This doesn't have to be complicated." "Everything's complicated," Victoria said with a small laugh. "Then let's make it simple. Stay for breakfast. If you want to go after that, go. If you want to hang out, hang out. No expectations either way." She smiled. "That sounds nice. Simple. I like simple." They made breakfast together, which mostly consisted of Daniel scrambling eggs while Victoria made toast, and complained about how he didn't have any fruit in his apartment. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from topic to topic. How her work trip had actually gone. A project he was excited about at work. Random observations about their building neighbors. After breakfast, Victoria did go back to her apartment to shower and change. She said she'd be back in an hour, and Daniel used that time to shower himself and tidy up. When she knocked on his door again, she was wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair still damp. "So what do people do on Saturday afternoons?" she asked, flopping down on his couch. "I usually catch up on work, sometimes go to the gym." "Exciting stuff. That sounds terrible. Let's do something fun instead." "Like what?" "I don't know. Something we haven't done before. Something that doesn't involve museums or restaurants or any of our usual spots." They ended up at a bookstore across town that Daniel had heard about but never visited. It was one of those independent places with creaky floors and books stacked everywhere, the kind that smelled like paper and coffee and possibility. They spent 2 hours wandering through the aisles, pulling out random books to show each other, reading passages aloud, laughing at terrible cover art. Victoria found a cookbook with ridiculous recipes and insisted they had to try making something from it. Daniel found a mystery novel with the worst first line he'd ever read and made her listen to the entire first chapter. They left with a bag of books neither of them needed but both wanted. Walking back to the car, Victoria reached for his hand. It was such a natural gesture, like they'd been doing it for years. Daniel laced his fingers through hers and felt something settle in his chest. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time, that thought didn't scare him. That evening, they attempted one of the recipes from the cookbook. It was supposed to be a simple pasta dish, but somehow became a disaster involving too much garlic and a small kitchen fire that set off Daniel's smoke alarm. They ordered pizza instead, laughing about their complete failure as chefs. "We should probably not try that again," Victoria said, picking pepperoni off her slice. "Agreed. I'll stick to takeout." Smart man. They ate on the floor of his living room, the TV playing some movie neither of them was watching. It was comfortable, easy, like they'd been doing this for months instead of just starting. And maybe that should have worried Daniel, how quickly this all felt normal. But he was tired of worrying, tired of second-guessing. Victoria was right. Life was too short to play it safe. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said suddenly, setting down her pizza. Daniel's stomach tightened. Those words never led anywhere good. "Okay, I'm happy. Like genuinely happy. And that scares me because usually when I'm this happy, something goes wrong. The other shoe drops. Everything falls apart." "Victoria, I'm not saying that to freak you out," she continued. "I just need you to know that I'm choosing to not let that fear win. I'm choosing to just be happy and deal with whatever comes later. Because this right now with you? It's good. Really good. Daniel reached over and took her hand. I'm happy too. And I'm also scared. But I think being scared together is better than being safe and alone. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes ago. She laughed, that real genuine laugh that made his chest feel warm. They finished their pizza and watched the rest of the movie, Victoria eventually falling asleep with her head on his shoulder. Daniel didn't move, didn't want to wake her, just sat there thinking about how much his life had changed in a few short weeks. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. They'd have coffee most mornings before work, dinner together a few times a week, weekends spent exploring the city or just hanging out in one of their apartments. It wasn't rushed or overwhelming. It was just easy. Daniel's sister called one Sunday afternoon when he and Victoria were attempting to assemble furniture she'd bought online. The instructions were in 3 different languages, none of which made sense, and they were both laughing at their complete incompetence when his phone rang. Hey Jess, he answered, putting her on speaker. Hey yourself. I haven't heard from you in like 2 weeks. I was starting to think you died. I've been busy. Busy with what? Your incredibly exciting Saturday nights alone with Netflix? Victoria laughed and Daniel's sister immediately pounced. Who's that? Daniel, is someone there? Yeah, this is Victoria. She's my... He paused, realizing they'd never actually defined what they were to other people. Girlfriend, Victoria supplied easily, grinning at his shocked expression. I'm his girlfriend. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then his sister practically shrieked. Oh my God, Daniel, you have a girlfriend. Why didn't you tell me? It's kind of new, he said, still processing Victoria's casual declaration. Well, I want to meet her. Are you free next weekend? They ended up meeting his sister and her husband for brunch the following Saturday. Daniel was nervous, but Victoria seemed completely calm. She charmed his sister within 5 minutes, swapping stories and laughing like they'd known each other for years. When they left, his sister pulled him aside. I like her, she said. Like really like her. She's good for you. You seem happy. I am, Daniel admitted. Happier than I've been in a long time. Good. Don't screw it up. Thanks for the vote of confidence. A week later, Victoria's best friend came to visit from Seattle. Daniel met her at a restaurant downtown, and while he'd been nervous about that too, it went well. Her friend pulled him aside at one point while Victoria was in the bathroom. She's different with you, she said. In a good way. More herself. Her ex made her small, made her think she had to be less to be loved. You make her bigger, if that makes sense. It did make sense. And hearing it made Daniel realize how much Victoria had changed in the time he'd known her. She laughed more easily now, seemed more confident, less guarded. He liked to think he'd played some small part in that, the same way she'd helped him open up again. 3 months after that night when Victoria had shown up at his door and said she was tired of running,